Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this insight video for the Global Forum for Responsible Recruitment on labor migration to Taiwan. I am Bonny Ling. I'm the Executive Director of Work Better Innovations, and I'm also a research fellow at the Institute for Human Rights and Business. So, a short overview on the labor migration to Taiwan. We're only looking at 4 migration corridors to Taiwan. And these are from Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia. The number of foreign migrant workers to Taiwan, it's around 700,000. Of course, the number could be up or down, considering the fact that we're just looking at the border opening up again after COVID, but it's roughly around there. If we look at the sectors, under which migrant workers are placed, there are two. They're called productive industries and also the care sector. If we look at the different countries of origin in terms of absolute numbers, around Indonesia and Vietnam roughly have the same number. And then you have about 150,000 for migrant workers coming from the Philippines, and then Thailand with roughly around 60,000. Now, most migrant workers to Taiwan are placed in industry, and then about 200,000 are placed in the care sector. And they include both institutional care and also domestic care. Let's focus now on industry. Now, like I said before, there are 4 migration corridors to Taiwan. And if you look at the participation in productive industries by nationality, in terms of absolute numbers, Vietnam as a country of origin comes out top of the list with around 220,000. Now, these figures are the latest available as of August 2022. And then Philippines at about, 120,000. Thailand, followed by Thailand and Indonesia. Now, what is interesting is if we look at migrant workers in industry as percentage of their total by nationality, we'll see that almost exclusively all migrant workers coming from Thailand are placed in industry, followed by Vietnam at roughly 90%, Philippines next, and Indonesia 30%. And this is because most migrant workers coming from Indonesia are placed in the domestic care sector, and most of them are women migrants. I want to talk quickly today, since the focus is on responsible recruitment, look at some of the challenges to responsible recruitment in Taiwan, and there are 3. So we'll start with 1, legally accepted practice of fees that are borne by migrant workers themselves. 2 is a known problem, lack of job mobility. And then 3 would be what I call loss in translation. And I'll talk about this in more detail. So, challenge to responsible recruitment, this normative framework under which migrant workers are paying fees and it's legally permitted. Well, this is a quote from the Fair Square's 5 corridor report, and they focus on Philippines, Taiwan, this migration corridor. And they had this very interesting number, which is that every year, the recruitment sector in Taiwan earns about close to 500 million US dollars in fully legal monthly service fees from its migrant workers. And there is a separate discussion about what this actually means. What are monthly service fees actually? What do they provide for? And it's akin to kind of like a human resource fee. They labor brokers provide language interpretation to help the employer manage their foreign workforce. So, what are these fees that's directly borne by migrant workers to Taiwan? Let's look at these numbers. So, it's a tier system. So, for a migrant worker, for those who are in their first year of employment in Taiwan, they pay about 1,800 new Taiwan dollars a month. And this is taken directly from their monthly pay. The number goes down a little bit for their second year, and it goes down again for the third year and every year thereafter. One US dollar is roughly about 30 new Taiwan dollars. So, this is between 50 US dollars to 60 US dollars a month. Now, what is interesting is if we look at the service fees that's levied from the employers, they paid 2,000 new Taiwan dollars a year. So here you see a very, differential system where migrant workers pay between US dollars 50 to 60 a month. That's taken directly from their monthly wage, and employers pay 2,000, and it's counted on a yearly basis. Here, I want to show you, this is a screen grab of deductions, these monthly service fees deducted from a group of migrant workers coming from Vietnam to work in Taiwan. And there you can see to my left, 1,500, and this denotes the monthly service fees that they must pay. And so this means that the migrant workers in this group are in their third year of employment in Taiwan or after. Well, many of you on this call today would know about IOO definitions of recruitment fees and related costs in the IOO document. And there, the recruitment fees are broadly understood to encompass three different categories. You have the recruitment fees, you have the recruitment related costs, and then the third category are all the legitimate and reasonable and undisclosed costs. Fees that are transferred under the table, for which no receipts are given. So what does this mean in the Taiwan context? I just want to quickly highlight the fact we know that Vietnam to Taiwan migration corridor represents some of the highest fees and related costs paid. So we're looking at roughly US dollars between 4,000 to 6,500 in recruitment fees that's collected from Vietnamese migrant workers to Taiwan, including 1,000 deposit. And then on top of that, we have the recruitment related costs of the monthly service fees that Vietnamese migrant workers in Taiwan pay to their Taiwanese labor brokers. And if we look at this as a percentage of their monthly income, their base monthly income, not counting the overtime for their jobs in manufacturing, it's quite high. It's about 7% of their base monthly wage that's taken away directly from their monthly fee. It means it will take them longer to pay back the fees they took out in Vietnam. Another challenge to responsible recruitment is a known problem, is the lack of job mobility, that migrant workers, when they come to Taiwan, their visa is pegged to their employer. They could change it. There are ways under which they could change their employer, for instance, in cases of abuse, and they're given a transfer period to find another employer. But we know the problems exist with setting a very high bar for migrant workers to consider to change their employer because of issues, coercive effects of things like debt bondage, and their fear of losing employment and be sent back to their country of origin before their fees are fully repaid. I want to quickly talk about the last challenge, the third challenge I identified in the beginning of the presentation, on what I call basically loss in translation, misalignment of terms in English and Chinese as they are locally understood. And here we must look at the fact that forced labor in English and Chinese, as it is used in Taiwan, could mean different things. So there might be concepts that's not captured, and that kind of impedes an accurate understanding of what forced labor is under international labor standards. So here, let me just start with, we know the ILO definition, Convention number 29, defines forced or compulsory labor as all work or services which is exacted from any person under the menace of any penalty and for which the person has not offered himself or herself voluntarily. So this international definition rests on two pillars. One, the menace of any penalty, and two, voluntariness on the part of the worker offering his or her service. Now, if we look at Taiwan Labor Standards Act, a key labor document, legislation in Taiwan, you'll see that it references the menace of penalty pillar, but it doesn't say anything about voluntariness. So Article 5 of the Taiwan Labor Standards Act talks about no employer shall, by force, coercion, detention, or other illegal means compel a worker to perform work. Now, this means what happens in reality is that, clues, data points that we use for forced labor assessment, to kind of understand the element of voluntariness. Things like, perhaps the worker is required to perform a job that is different from what he or she understood, from the contract that was offered at the beginning, or abusive requirements of overtime or on-call work that was not agreed or understood with the worker, work with substandard wage or work under degrading living conditions linked to the job. So these things are kind of mute and they're not as emphasized by the law. So if we look at the broad range of the ILO forced labor indicators, there's good alignment on things like indicator number 5, physical sexual violence, 6, intimidations or threats. But on the other elements, such as abuse of vulnerability, indicator number 1, or the indicator on debt bondage, number 9, there's a less emphasis and there's more miscommunication about what does that mean on worker giving his or her voluntary consent. So I think this is something that needs to be worked on in the Taiwanese context, that there needs to be better understanding and more clear alignment with international labor standards so that concepts are not lost in translation. With the aim of moving to the employer pays principle, it's an uphill struggle, as in other jurisdictions, to move to this framework that no worker should pay for a job and that all costs of recruitment should be borne by, not by the workers, but completely by the employer. If you're interested to find out more, the details about how we can move to a responsible recruitment system in Taiwan, I welcome you to check out the submission that we sent to the US State Department Trafficking Persons for their report for 2022. And it has a lot more of these details. We can go into a lot more technical details about misalignments in policy, in law, and some of the challenges going forward, including but not limited to the monthly service fees that are permitted under Taiwanese law. So let me thank you for your attention. And my email and my contacts are there if you want to reach out for any further discussions on this important topic. And enjoy the Global Forum. Thank you for your attendance and for watching this video.